Question number 12, Jan Logie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Social Development and asks, does she stand by her statement in relation to sexual and domestic violence that, quote, it is actually about services on the ground that are able to address it, unquote?
Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr. Speaker, yes.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Jan Logie.
Given this focus on services on the ground, will she step in to ensure that the only 24/7 specialist sexual violence service in Canterbury has the funding to remain open after Friday, when it will otherwise close due to her funding decisions?
Mr.
Honourable
Speaker,
Paula Bennett.
well, that's not correct. It's not correct that it's due to our funding decisions that it's closing. They are currently not an MSD-approved provider, although officials have been working with them. That's a report that I've had. We are very keen to see them stay open, but at the end of the day, they have to be an approved provider and they have to be financially viable for us to be doing that.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Jan Logie.
What is her message to the women of Canterbury who from Friday will no longer have a specialist sexual violence service to go to for help now that she's refused to fund self-care, safe care?
Mr.
Honourable
Speaker,
Paula Bennett.
we are simply not just refusing to fund them. There are issues with the provider that we're very keen to resolve. We will continue working with them. But, the member's shaking her head. She makes it sound like we don't want to fund them or it's a desire for us to see them close down. Nothing could be further from the truth. But when there are issues with the provider, we have a responsibility, accounting-wise and auditing-wise, to the taxpayers of New Zealand to make sure that that funding is being used appropriately, and that's what we are doing.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Jan Logie.
Has she consulted the police in that decision, who refer 4 victims a day to that service and are required to refer to when somebody reports, but who after Friday will not even have a service in Canterbury to meet their protocol obligations for immediate support for victims?
Mr. Speaker, I really have nothing further to add. I am being as upfront as I can. There are issues that we are very keen to resolve. The Ministry are working with that provider. We would like to see them open next week, but we have a responsibility to the taxpayer to make sure that we are doing that in the appropriate manner, and that's what we're doing.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
In light of her answer to the primary question, why did she and her ministry deny funding to Shakti to have a safe house for Asian, African and Middle Eastern women who are victims of domestic violence in Wellington, despite Housing New Zealand having found a property for them?
Mr. Speaker,
Honourable Paula Bennett.
we are still working with Shakti, so we've done a review of the Wellington region. They are working with Women's Refuge, not at this time because we think there's further work that needs to be done alongside the refuge, but we are certainly not closing the door completely.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Jan Logie.
Doesn't the fact that services are closing, services are being denied funding, and refuge funding cuts has meant that Palmerston North Women's Refuge has lost one of its 2 safe houses, 3 staff, including all of their children's advocates, and have had to cancel their children's program, just show that it's not about services on the ground at all, but about saving money by shortchanging women and children?
Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Paula Bennett.
That is simply not true, that it is about shortchanging women and children. What I can say is, yesterday I said that the women's refuges are getting millions more under this government than they were under Labour. So it has increased from 11.6 million in 07-08 to actually 15.3 million now in 13-14. We put an extra $10.4 million into sexual violence services that we announced just 2 months ago, which shows a real commitment to us making sure that that funding is there for frontline services. Actually, we have a responsibility, though, as well, to make sure that that funding is being spent responsibly. That is what we are doing across the board. We will support those services where we can, where it's a responsible thing to do.
That concludes questions for oral answer. Would some honourable member care to move that the House take note
Mr. Speaker.
of miscellaneous business?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to do so. Mr. Speaker, just last